Okay, we are live. Welcome, attendees. I'm just going to give everyone a second to join and then we'll make a start. Okay, let's make a start. So, welcome everyone, welcome one and all to the next webinar in our Toolbox Learning from Incident series. My name is Ibrahim Khan, I'm a technical officer from the Energy Institute, and I'm here to present our next webinar. So before we begin, I'd like to thank our Toolbox supporters. They're listed on the screen. If you're interested in becoming a supporter, please do reach out to us at the Energy Institute and arrangements can be made. So today's session is on new ways of workplace training using virtual reality. And our final event in this calendar year will be on road safety on December 6th. You can sign up to attend on the Toolbox website in the usual way, and reminders will go out in due course. So what is Toolbox? This webinar series is produced in support of Toolbox. Toolbox is a free-to-use web app which shares learning from incidents to frontline operators. The app has over 500 learning resources, including 100 videos presented in practical terms for your organization. It's also available in 10 languages, so you've really got no excuse to get on over to that website address and check it out. That's toolbox.energyinst.org. Bit of housekeeping our frequent flyers will know about already. The main points here to remember are that the webinar will be made available after the fact. We'll get that uploaded in a few days. And if you are planning on asking us a few questions, do not post them in the chat. Please use the Q&A function. There will also be a poll being launched as I'm speaking, and we'd like our attendees to answer that poll to better direct our conversation and the lessons that we're going to be learning. A note on CPD for our EI members. This webinar counts towards your CPD hours, for which you can find a template on the EI website. If you're a member of another membership organization, you may still be able to use this towards your CPD there as well. And if you're not an EI member, you might want to consider becoming one. So who are we at the Energy Institute? We are a chartered professional membership body for the global energy industry. Our aim is to create a better and safer future for society by promoting knowledge, skills, and industry good practice in the energy sector. And of course, part of that mission means accelerating the global energy transition to net zero. On your screen now should be some information about defining industry good practice. As part of our mission, we publish hundreds of good practice guidance documents covering the entire energy system, including human factors, process safety, hydrogen, and much more as well. Some of our resources are available as free downloads, and whether you work in energy or a neighboring industry, there's something for everyone. So check out the Energy Institute publishing website. Finally, our risk management training courses are also available through the website in the aforementioned areas, as well as NEBOSH and IOSH training. Those of you in attendance today can use the discount code Toolbox25 for a 25% discount on courses booked before the end of the year. So on to our speaker. We're joined today by Willem Peuscher, He is an operational safety and emergency response expert. He's gained operational HSE learning and development experience in Shell Upstream. He's also a partner at Versat LTC. That's a virtual safety learning company that develops, produces, and sells virtual learning services. Willem is also a member of the Safety Leaders Foundation and the Stitching Tripod Foundation. So without further ado, your main speaker for today, Willem Peuscher. Good afternoon, Willem.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Ibrahim, for introducing me. And thanks for the opportunity to talk about a very interesting topic. It's new ways of workplace learning, and then particularly focusing on virtual reality. And I would like to give the audience a perspective of this new way of learning and how it also might affect and improve your control of the critical business controls in your company. I will focus on the virtual reality because it is a rapidly developing technology, and it gives a very interesting new perspective on learning and gets also the appreciation from the trainees, whether they are youngsters new in the company or older ones already seasoned in the company. And to illustrate this, I would like to start with, let's say, the business critical activities. You all have in your outfit critical activities, and I would like to start with an example in the racing one. That's the next slides. And the racing one is that are people which have very winning teams. And one of the winning teams in the Formula One is lately the Red Bull team. And it's good to look to how they were able to get a very good performance. I think it is the next little video gives you in a slide, in a nutshell, an overview of, let's say, the critical controls and critical tasks to get in a pit stop the car coming in and get it as quick out. And maybe you could focus in this little example on the critical activities of the various people and also the critical task they are executing. And at the end of the 30 seconds or 40 seconds of video, we'll think about what is a successful team and what are the critical activities. Okay, let's try the video, Ibrahim. Okay, thank you. In the next slides, I have just a summary of my impression of a winning team. A successful team, every team member knows his task and roles and responsibilities, and is also very competent in his task. He's also able to challenge, let's say, methodologies and to improve performance to at least achieve that such a car is leaving the cockpit within 2 seconds. Also, these guys need to have constant training, and the training should preferably not be in the pit stop itself only, because that is really where they have to perform. And of course, a good team is also celebrating success. Well, the reason I will use this as an example is that I use this later on in my presentation as a couple of key ingredients. But let's first then view on why I am presenting this and a little bit my background. That's on the next slide. Well, I grew up in Royal Dutch Shell in various positions, first in the downstream manufacturing and later in the upstream operations. But I also had positions in the learning University of Shell at the last part of my career, also particularly in the health and the safety outfits. And there's also my passion situated. I'm already for quite some time in the Tripod Foundation, a board member, and since 2017 also the board member of the Safety Leaders Foundation, which focus on improving safety at the workplace with all kind of visual means. And since 2 years, also the commercial company Versat, who tried to provide virtual reality safety learning. Well, that's a little bit my background and why I'm presenting today. The next slide gives a little overview of what I going to talk about. Well, first of all, I would like to focus on the successful teams and how are you able to identify successful teams and also get an understanding of what the critical success factors are to make this team successful. And there I would like to focus also a little bit on the Tripod Beta methodology. Then I would like to focus on the critical business activities and controls, and in particular on the safety critical controls, which are represented by the life-saving rules. I will give a short information on what these are and why these are successful. And last but not least, and that is also the theme of today, is how do you get the people involved in the organization aware of these critical controls, and how does the virtual reality can play a part in this. So let's go to the next slide where I look to, let's say, the business critical controls and also the successful teams. Well, Tripod Beta is, I don't know whether you know it, but this methodology, but for those who don't, it's an investigation methodology, and it can investigate unexpected business events and incidents. But what Tripod does is it compares, let's say, a successful team with a team which is less successful and had an incident. And then on the right-hand side, you see this Swiss cheese model where the critical business controls, well, when they have vulnerabilities in it, yeah, it can lead to a business incident or even a personal incident. And that's where you want to understand. The focus of Tripod is also on the business controls and on the people who are having to maintain these controls. But the majority is to understand, let's say, the underlying organizational issues, because that is driving the people's behavior. The behavioral part is a very important part, because in the Tripod concept, you don't want to blame people, you want to understand why they acted as they acted. Well, the Tripod Foundation, where I'm also then the member of, supports developments in safety of people's life in the workplace, but also assures the quality of the Tripod training methodology. Well, what recently new elements in the Tripod outfit is that we made a simpler Tripod tool, which is particularly applicable for the lower risk events. And we call it the Tripod Lite. It's probably simpler to understand. It's more linear in its way, but it has all the different ingredients on the human behavioral and the underlying issues. There are also recently new leadership modules developed, and they are also visible on the Energy Institute's pages on Tripod Beta. And last but not least, there are a very interesting insights workshop developed, where if you are an investigation team and management team and you want to really learn from what the investigation team got as memory and also insights, that is a way how to deal with these insights and come to good resolutions, how to improve and prevent repeated incidents. Also, these modules are on the Energy Institute website under the Tripod pages. Well, the Tripod was in fact very important for the next slide, because in the 2008, there was a study done in Shell because of the large number of fatalities and the frustration about these fatalities. And this review was done to look into 30 years of fatalities in the Tripod incident investigations. And the question was, why are we having these fatalities, although we think we are doing relatively good in business controls? But it appeared that these fatalities were caused in some 12 areas, and these could be explained for 70% of the fatalities. In that time, also Professor Hudson from Leiden and Delft University in the Netherlands reviewed why people acted as they acted in these incidents. And he made use of this human behavioral model, which is given on the right bottom. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the right-hand model is the human behavioral part, and the human behavior theory is identifying why people act as they acted. Thinking about the holes in the Swiss cheese model, people might create these holes because they do things unintentionally in not the expected way. It could be a slip or a lapse of mind. It could be that they wanted to do the right thing, but they just did it wrong without intention. But there's also a part which is called a violation. So suppose a guy has to travel from A to B and he has a company car, and the company car has a seatbelt, but the seatbelt is not functioning. Well, he has to wear the seatbelt. So the question is, what should he do? And in most cases, people drive the car and yeah, accept the additional risks. At least that was the conclusion of Professor Hudson on looking to these incidents, that people made violations, but due to organization optimization. They thought the company would appreciate they do it that way because it's quicker or simpler. That knowledge, together with, let's say, the 12 areas, resulted in the 12 life-saving rules of Shell. These were implemented in the 1st of July 2009. And I will come back on the success of that and also the performance. In 2011, the IOGP, that's the International Organization of Gas and Oil and Gas Producing Companies, also reviewed their database, and they had a broader database of incidents, and they came with some 18 areas of concern. There were a little bit more areas because there were also more constructional things and logistic elements in it. So these 18 areas were a kind of footprint on the type of risks in the oil and gas, but also construction and in the logistics area. In 2013, Professor Groeneweg of Leiden and Delft University, together with myself, presented, let's say, the results of 3 years of implementation of the life-saving rules in Shell. And there was a big reduction found on that implementation. It's not all facilitated by the life-saving rule, but a lot can be explained because of that. And I have one slide later on to explain that. And in 2018, IOGP developed 9 life-saving rules as an industry standard. And these 9 life-saving rules are just a fingerprint of the main issues in industry. And these are related to driving, it's related to the line of fire, and to standing behind a reversing truck. It's dealing with hot work, so ignition sources in hydrocarbon areas, in working at height. It's also bypassing safety controls. So if an area is barricaded and you walk through it, yeah, that is bypassing a safety control. Confined space entry, lifting and hoisting, not walking under suspended loads, is dealing with work permit and permitted work and energy isolation. Well, these rules were standardized and simplified. So the 18 which they had originally were condensed to these 9. And many companies are now applying these, which make it also easier for contractors to go from one company to another. Well, the reason I explain this is that if you look to safety, these are the safety critical business indicators and tasks and activities in a large part of the industry. We also have seen in many other parts of the industry and activities that mostly the incidents which occur and fatalities could be explained by one of these life-saving rules. Well, let's look to the next slide, why these life-saving rules are so successful. Well, in 2009, on the 1st of July, so half the year, these rules were explained and implemented. in Shell, and the performance was spectacular. In the rest of the year 2009, no fatalities were happening, and also in the years thereafter, there was trend, a very steep trend downwards. Ultimately, in 2020, where there were no fatalities anymore. There's no guarantee for the future, but it was not expected in the early days when implementing it that it could be possible for such a big international company to be having zero fatalities. Also, the number of lives saved, yeah, you could argue how many there are, but they are significant. And also the comparison was done on the fatal accident rate, which combines it, the fatalities number with the work hours. And that was also compared with the IOGP average. And there it also was demonstrated that before and after the implementation of the life-saving rules, there was a steep change in improving the fatal accident rates. Of course, this trend is supported by a number of other things, like safety leadership in the organization, the hearts and minds concepts, and also the implementation of, in the early days, of road safety and in-vehicle monitoring systems. But ultimately, after 2009, there was a clear knick and steepness in improvements. Well, the reason to put this is that on the safety critical activities, the life-saving rules were quite important. And the next slide gives in a nutshell why this is important. And then I also come to the training bit. Well, the life-saving rules are important because it makes the concepts of critical tasks very simple, like it makes it visual. And a little rule of thumb, if you can make a picture of it, it will attract people. It's also better to understand. These are the controls which are under the control of the worker in the field. So that is another important part. The other part is that compliance should be possible, and non-compliance should be also very clear that that is totally not acceptable. Not to harm, let's say, the individual in the field, but also give him the opportunity to say no to a job. To illustrate this is in the past, we had the stories that people who needed to have a lanyard while working at heights outside, let's say, controlled areas, that they sometimes fell down because there was no lanyard. And then you could say, yeah, why was there no lanyard? Well, sometimes all kind of reasons, but one of the reasons was sometimes that they were not provided. And they were not provided because it was not specified in the contract. And if it's not specified in the contract, yeah, the contractor will probably not facilitate it. There are, of course, countries where it's legally mandated, but there are also many countries where it's not legally mandated. And for big companies, it's important to get a consensus on what is the minimum requirements. But that already alludes that the worker in the field often have to deal with problems which are in the whole supply chain happening. So therefore, implementation of the life-saving rules also mean that you have to get the whole supply chain well organized and that everybody understands what should be in the contract defined. So then with this in mind, you understand that a lot of people need to be trained on all kind of levels, and that safety leadership should take place from the top to of the company, but also communication to staff councils, to the human resource people, the legal people, supply chain, etc., and also, of course, monitoring the fields. And that is also alluding to the point that training is a very important part of getting, let's say, these essential business controls in place. And you can translate it to your own situation, how that is, which controls you have in your organization. But the next slide provides, let's say, my view of then the part of the training philosophy, and also how important it is to get towards the different people. In fact, you have all kind of different people far away from the fields, who also need to have an understanding of these critical controls, and therefore you have to have a training strategy. You have to focus on those people who have certain roles in the organization, and give that type of training which they need, and not more and not less. So you have to think about that aspect as well. And also, you have to deal with adult learning, and adult learning techniques are different than from the pre-adult phase. So classroom training would fit for some people, but for a large audience, it is not that ideal way, because that is the way how in the past they didn't like to learn. So therefore, the concept of gaming also comes across, is that you could consider that gaming as a learning tool is also a good way of getting things towards people. A simple example is if you see people driving and gaming with, for example, a racing game, and they only can start the game when they have to buckle up. Probably they will also apply that aspect if they drive in the normal car. In the Western world, it's quite normal nowadays that people buckle up, but there are large areas where they are not that familiar with it. But if via a game you can influence, let's say, the behavior of people because they see it's working, it's a very interesting part. And that is also the reason why we in Versat use these concepts in the virtual reality outfit to get people trained. And now I come a little bit more to the topic of today of the virtual reality. And the next slide gives a little overview of how we look to the learning technologies. We have, of course, various different techniques on how to get people trained. And all these techniques might work. A lot of people are trained either by classroom or by e-learning in a various form. And we believe that the virtual reality learning can top on either to these existing ones or replace even part of the existing training. And it's a new way of learning. So we think that it's good, but we also have, let's say, research which also helps us to believe that. The next slide gives a couple of the games we developed, and these are in fact there to train, let's say, the HSE critical controls towards the whole workforce. The first game you see on the left-hand side is an active game, and I do not know whether you know Whack the Mole game, but that is a game which is with the virtual reality headset on. You are playing a game which you see in the headset, and in fact, it's you can choose different levels, a little bit dependent on your function. The fundamental part is for office people who need to know the icons and the rules, but you have probably people who are professional drivers or are advanced in operations who need to know more rules. And in fact, the differences are that people know the icon and the rules, and the more advanced ones, they also know, let's say, the critical tasks which are related to it. For example, if you are working at height, you also need, as part of it, you need to inspect your fall equipment, and also you need to tie off 100% to an improved enter point. And what does 100% exactly mean? Well, that type of details you will get in the advanced training, and you get the learning over there. The middle one is a little bit more for people who are on an operational job and or on driver's job, and there you join a person who is going to go to work and perform his work, and you are the observer. In fact, you are an actor, in fact, in a movie, and have to play together with the person and make sure that he arrives safe at home at the end of the day. So there you provide an active activity as a player, as a trainee, and over there you need to observe, let's say, situations which are right or which could turn to the left or to the wrong side. In fact, you if you think about the Swiss cheese model, you have to spot the holes in the controls and then make an observation. And the last example, which I would like to give in this context, is learning from incidents concepts, where you also see the learning from incident and real incident, what happened in the past, and see that developing. And there, as the observer, you need to make an intervention and um, think about what could go wrong or what could be the next phase. It's also getting insights and practical insight of what happened in the past, and also why people maybe accepted certain things to happen, but often these are resulting in a fatality. Well, these are a couple of examples of games we developed. And now I would like to go to the next slide to look a little bit to these games. These virtual reality headsets we use are standalone. They are not connected to a computer. You can use them everywhere. It's in nowadays also not that expensive anymore. It's sometimes cheaper than an advanced telephone or a smartphone. But what are the interesting parts? As I mentioned, you become an actor in a video, in a movie, and therefore you really are getting as a trainee involved in a kind of storyline. And what has been shown also that people's hearts and minds are one because of they are part of the story. They are not um, uh, at a distance. No, they are in the middle. Part of it is also you need to take certain actions, and sometimes these actions are not right. Maybe it's leading to unwanted things, but that is totally okay. You are allowed to take making mistakes and redo it again up till the moment you do it right. And that is also often a learning methodology that you make a mistake and learn from that mistake. So that is in this virtual uh, games is totally acceptable, and it's also not harming you. What is different with this virtual reality outfit is that you will not come to the classroom. No, the classroom will come to you in the form of a virtual reality headset. So that is a very important element. It's also, if I got sometimes a question, how many people can you train at the same time? Well, these headsets are not that expensive anymore. You can train quite a bit of people together. But the question would be, do these people all need to know this material at the same moment? Or do they need it spread in the time? So you are able to fine tune on when the people need this type of training. Also, the training is faster because people learn quicker. And I have a slide later on to illustrate that. But before that, um, also what is new is that these people also like these games and wanting to do it. And that is sometimes also a difference with other type of training. The headsets are also maintenance free. It is standalone material. They can be sent to the trainees at home if wanted, or to a central point where people can be trained. And in fact, it's also relatively low cost because you don't need an instructor anymore. No travel time and travel cost. And last but not least, of course, it's a better recollection of understanding. Well, maybe to illustrate in the next slides on these factual things is a study which was done by Price Waterhouse Cooper in comparing, let's say, world-class training with virtual reality. And they had a couple of interesting observations, and that study was done in 1 or 2 years ago, where they compared different work classes with an equivalent of virtual reality training. And it was done in different type of industries, also in the medical part. And the area is that you will be provided with, let's say, visuals. You will not see a lot of words. Sometimes you cannot prevent it, but if there is wordy elements, you also will have the voiceovers and the voice which helps people, especially with, let's say, illiterate, not literate people in let's say developing countries. They are benefited from visual learning. But what the study also revealed is that people are quite much more focused and less distracted. And you can understand that if you had a headset on, maybe you have had that in the past. If your phone gets a message, yeah, you're not able to read that message because you have the headset on. You're focused in the game, so there's no distraction, and that helps also to learn the elements. The emotional connect is also maybe trivial because you are part of the game and part of the movie, and also are connected to getting the people safe to the endpoint. As you have to take certain actions, the willingness to take action in reality is also increased because you have practiced that in the virtual reality outfit. Nowadays, also with the hand controls and the tracking of that, you can do all kind of motions with your hands and test whether people understand the right things. And last but not least, also because these elements, the type of learning gets to the people faster. Okay, well, that is in a nutshell the Price Waterhouse Cooper findings. The next one is a little bit how it works. In the slides, will give you that these games are loaded on headsets. These headsets are distributed to the different people on work sites or office, and there they will be trained. Other part in the next slide is, let's say, that you can provide these headsets to central points. For example, when visitors come, you have the visitors area, or if other training is needed near control rooms, you can have it in a control room or a cabin, or during turnaround work in the turnaround cabins, etc. So you can be provided to that in a central point. The alternative, if people are going from home to, let's say, a remote area, you also can send it to their home to get the training, and then they get they send it back. Well, the next slide, I provide a number of the different virtual reality packages which we have now developed, and just as an example, and maybe it appeals also to you, but the first one is the awareness on the life-saving rules. So focusing on the critical safety controls, especially for staff, contractors, visitors, etc. The next one is the operational part, where you go and visit during a day of the life of a person. But we also have compiling of these, which could be used for turnaround management, where particular risks are entering confined spaces, working at height, welding, and that type of elements. The other part is the deep insight learning via the learning from incidents part, that can be also used as part of the former ones, but also in toolbox talks or in learning from incident sessions. And particularly, and lately, we developed for the road safety quite a bit of material, which is for road safety training, very interesting, also in remote areas, in graded roads. It's more also for the rural areas. Well, next slide gives a little bit of the application areas. It's virtual reality games, which we highly recommend, because it's in our opinion the very interesting game type. But of course, if people don't want that, there is also an equivalent PC or tablet learning available. But you have to keep in mind that it is it's good, but it has a couple of the elements which are less attractive than the virtual headsets. Also, what we have available is these explosion-proof glasses, where you see an headset, but where you have a little screen in front of your eyes, and you can use this in the field either to do field audits on the life chain rules or also learn yourself on a couple of aspects of the life chain rules. There's also camera in it, and that is a nice new application area. And last but not least, we use also particularly for the road safety an advanced simulator, but these type of simulators also can be used for heavy truck operations and other type of operations. And they're together with the virtual reality headsets and or screens, you are able to get a very near reality experience and also feel the differences from right operations or wrong operations. So that is in a nutshell the material. Well, just to round off in the next slides, I provided, let's say, an understanding of a successful team, and in my view, the racing and formula team are a nice example of it. We looked to the HHE typical task and roles of people in the racing team, but also translated that to the safety outfits and what people how these people need to be trained. Like in a racing sport, also these people are trained with all kind of simulation techniques, and also the racing simulators are well known, also used by the professionals and also by the other people around these. Then we also looked to how to look to challenging the current work practices and the triple beta methodology to think about how an excellent team works and how it's possible that there are incidents happening and what to do about it. And then we focused on the training aspect, where the virtual reality opens a very nice additional amount of opportunity to train people, either as a separate training in itself or as a supplemental element to existing training and get different type of aspects trained to people. Well, if you are interested in testing at this next slide, then it's also possible to, the next slide is an overview to do a kind of test package and get some support on testing, let's say, the material in your company and evaluate in the site. So that is in a nutshell what I would like to present. And the next slide is thank you for everybody. And also I'm interested to see whether there are any questions and which I can help them. Okay,
thank you very much,
can you
Willem.
help?
Yes, of course. Thank you for that talk. It's great to see how emerging technologies are being used to tackle problems in this space. We do actually have a few questions. So our first one is, do you find people get VR sickness when using or doing the training?
The answer is yes. Yeah, that is an element which happens, but it's what we also it's depending on the design of your games and also on the hardware. And in particular, the sickness arise if the people expect different type of motions towards what they see and feel in the virtual reality outfit. So answer is yes, but there is only a relatively small amount, and we are engineering it out from the ones, but it cannot be guaranteed that everybody has no problems with it. It's the same like color blindness and other things which we try to work on in our games to at least be successful, that different people with different aspects can do the learning.
Okay, so another question. I suppose you sort of answered this one already. Our attendee asks, is the training course done out in the field or in the back office, or do people need to go to a training center? If I remember correctly, you said that it can sort of be taken anywhere.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's different than what we have by now. So it's highly dependent on where, let's say, the people need the training. And it's also, yeah, we are all experienced to classroom training, and therefore think that there is a training center and you need to go to the training center, and that has a lot of benefits because it's well good area, and people sometimes also see it as a reward to go over there. But that can still be done. You can put it in a training center, and we have seen people who do that. But it also can be done at a spot. And in particular, if, for example, if you are you are about to do a certain task with a group of people, and it appears that some people needs some refreshments of the life-saving rules, yeah, it's not practical to send them to a training center. So it's better that before people start, that they review their competence on it, and if they need some refreshment, that they do it just at the start and before it. The training is not that long. It's also because of you cannot have this headset on for hours. No, it's training which takes, dependent on your competence level and your familiarity, between 10, 15 to 20 minutes. And then you have done the training. So it also particular is applicable for people who need to do it just before the job. And that makes it so attractive to apply.
Okay, another one on the actual VR experience itself. We've got an attendee that asks, are there options for customized training to reflect, for example, an organization's own assets or sites?
Yeah, the answer is yes, that can be done, but you have to keep in mind what the benefit is in terms of also the investment that you have to make, because making these the virtual reality animations, it's quite an experience. If you have the headset on, you can look in all directions. In all these directions, you see something. So if you have to change what is our standard approach towards what people have in a certain location, um, that might not be, let's say, very cost effective, because you have to think about what is the benefits. Our assumption is, but maybe I'm also interested in whether the question the person can clarify that, but the focus on, let's say, customization on the work environment in general, for example, if it is an office environment versus an offshore oil rig, or it's in construction onshore in without any oil and gas, it's more important to get that that area, that type of environment right, rather than to have an exact copy of what is exactly in the customer's area. Our experience is that the learners, by the way, are very receptive to what they see. They focus on the activities rather than on the environment. But that is how we have seen it so far. But the answer is yes, it can be done, but it's at a cost.
So elaborating on that a bit further, and a related question is, when the user puts on that VR headset, what is it that they normally see? Is it a sort of pre-rendered video? Is it something that's designed specifically for that, closer to a video game? So how does that work?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The point is, I can show something on the screen on the PC, but it's much different than if you experience yourself. Therefore, but I can explain a little bit. First of all, when people get the headset on, they need to familiarize themselves a little bit with the headset. Some people never had the headset on, so we make a kind of welcome so that people can look around. And in one of the video of one of the VR games, it's in loading depot, and you see truck running, and you see some other things happening, and you can look around and just adapt yourself and understand that you can look around and see different things. And then we explain, let's say, the controllers which you have in a hand. And what we use in the game is that one controller is a kind of laser gun to activate things, and the other is a tablet which you have in your hands, and there you can um, take some controls. And that we will explain, and we'll explain a little bit at the ease that you will sit down. That is the safest way, away from, let's say, instruments or other things, so that you have space to maneuver. So then people become a little bit at their ease on getting the headset on, and then they can start the game. There is a kind of explanation what the game is about, and also that there's some help functions, and if they want to redo things. So it's a little bit explanation, and then the game starts, and you go from A to B, and then you have to make interventions, and that is a real life area. So it's in a car or in a truck, um, and partly it's outside on a construction area, and partly on an area where it's a loading bay. So you have different environments where you see certain aspects, and there you take certain actions, and you need to observe, let's say, hazards. So it's also hazard hunting part, to understand what hazards are there and which are the hazards, and do you understand the type of hazards, and that will be then also explained later on. It's a little bit gaming elements. You can earn points, but yeah, in fact, the game is finalized if you covered all the elements which are required, and you can redo it, and you can redo it as long as you want. So that's a little bit the design of it.
Okay, perhaps one from me actually, having looked at our poll. Our respondents generally responded about 45% are from the oil and gas industry. And actually, we've got a fairly sizable chunk of about over 30% of people are calling themselves other. So in your experience, where is the interest or the primary interest coming from for this sort of training? Is it the oil and gas sector, or is it the medical sector? Where do we see that?
Well, in fact, it's the interesting part is that there is an interest from all kind of areas, especially because of virtual reality is relatively new. But it also need to get its place in the whole training outfit. It has a place in the learning of in the gaming, so for a non-commercial part. But the interest is from construction, from logistics, from oil and gas. It's from manufacturing. Um, the medical part is also over there. Um, but we focused mostly on, let's say, the life-saving rules as a concept, because that is a nice concept, because it's HSE critical controls, which a lot of people need to know. And therefore you can also work on these controls and play with it. But also, if you think about your home, what type of risks you run over there? Well, particularly some 5 out of the 9 life-saving rules also are applicable for home. Even if you would be learning it and giving it at schools, it would be applicable for the children to understand what are the risks they will run while going from and to school. So we have a broad area of people who are interested. And in fact, in the medical part, you also will see that they use this type of technique for exercising surgeries or critical activities. And then it's a slightly different approach on the virtual reality, because that is not a game to from A to B, but it's more a practice where to what type of activities you have to do with your hands, and which instruments you need to take, etc. And nowadays, with these controls and the haptonomic of the controls and gloves there are, are able to see your own hands on the screen and also exercise it. Also with remote teams, if you are in Los Angeles and the other is in Amsterdam and the next is in Tokyo, and you can work together on the same topic in a virtual classroom, let's say, and looking to various things. That's a slightly different approach than we practice, but that are the things which are interesting. And also for the road safety, I think it is a very an interesting one, because the road safety, the simulator we have with the virtual reality approach is able to provide the people a very good practice on how they perform on the roads. Also in combination with the in-vehicle monitoring systems which are available, you can link it to, let's say, the performance of people and think, hey, this person needs a little bit more training on this or that. And then you provide the module on that particular element, either by VR or with the simulator approach.
Okay, thank you for that answer. It looks like we've come to the end of our time and actually the end of our questions. It's funny you mentioned road safety, because that's a great segue into plugging our final event of the calendar year. So we'll be back on the 6th of December, at which time the main event will be on road safety. In the meantime, thank you to all attendees for participating. Massive thanks to Willem Peuscher for presenting. Don't forget to check out Toolbox. Don't forget to check out the EI's publishing website, and also check out Versa using the details on your screen. If you do have any further questions, hit us up at the Energy Institute. And thank you for attending. We'll see you soon.